Congratulations for signing up for a race at Ellison Lakeland Park with the Marauder group. My name's Ellison and I'm a triathlon coach with Total Tri Training. This short video today is to give you a basic insight into what you should be considering in your training program leading up to your race. Hopefully then you'll experience a very good race day and exceed your own expectations and perhaps achieve the goals that you've set for yourself on that race day, whether that's just to complete one of the race distances or to compete at the top end and actually come away with a very good performance. Now obviously you're well aware that you need to start to do some swimming, some biking and some running, and you might also be thinking, do I need to fit in some strength and conditioning or mobility and flexibility exercises? So what I'd like to do in this video is give you a basic understanding of what we would consider as a coach to put into your training plan, and then you can take some of the knowledge from this video today and hopefully build yourself a very basic but productive training plan towards one of your races. Now, first things to consider is that we are training for a purpose and to achieve a goal. Obviously in this case it's to complete a triathlon, whether that's a super sprint, standard, or indeed the middle distance later in the year. Then that is the main goal that we need to keep in mind. We aren't simply exercising just to burn calories or to make ourselves sort of feel better emotionally and mentally. This is with a specific purpose in mind. And with that in mind, what we need to consider is that the majority of what we're doing here is aerobic exercise, and what that means is we're using oxygen to mix with carbohydrates or fats within your body to produce energy. So even a super sprint distance is going to take well over 30 or 40 minutes. A sprint distance is well over an hour, and so on and so on. So even these distances that sound like they should be over quite quickly are still fueled by aerobic metabolism, and that's your body's ability to utilize oxygen. So the majority of everything that we're doing on a weekly basis should be to improve that ability. It should be to ensure that our aerobic engine gets stronger and therefore we get fitter, obviously, as we go along. Now, improvements don't happen overnight, and the main thing that we should look for is consistency, irrespective of what training you actually do. If you repeat it over and over again, and hopefully if you progress and make it a little bit more difficult as time goes on, then you will see the benefits. So what about a weekly schedule? Well, the first thing to consider is your time allowance. You know, do you have 6 hours a week, or maybe 8 or 10? Or are you very lucky and you've got many more hours in your week to devote to training than that? So once you've got an idea of your weekly time allowance and which days of the week you can train on, then the next thing is to think about how to split up your training time between the swim, the bike, the run, and perhaps the strength training. So generally speaking, as a broad approach, most people would spend about 50% of their weekly training hours on the bike. Now, this is because it's a great form of aerobic exercise without too much attrition of the joints and the muscles, and therefore you can repeat it day after day without causing too much pain and too much soreness. It's got probably one of the lower probabilities of developing injury or some tendinitis and things like that. So we can use biking to really develop our fitness without worrying too much about injury. Now, if that takes up 50% of your available training hours, then the remaining 50% is then often split between the swim and the run in fairly equal proportions there. Now, what you may wish to do, if you do know that you're weaker in one of the disciplines or quite considerably weaker, is you might want to tweak that balance and spend a little bit more time building up your weaker area. Now, obviously, if this is the swim, which is very, very common, you might want to then look at the swim mechanics and the swim stroke and perhaps get some advice on that, as swimming is much more dependent on technique than the other two sports, generally speaking. And again, just simply going into the pool and flailing around for an hour or so is perhaps not so productive. So if you're weaker on the run, then again, maybe make some efforts to join other people or some run groups and spend some time with some real focused run training. And that way you'll both develop your fitness in that area, but you'll also improve your confidence in that area, which is crucial as well. Overall, within your week, for more novice athletes, you would only want one or possibly two very, very hard training sessions in that week. You know, the sessions that you kind of dread beforehand and you don't really fancy doing until you get into it, but afterwards you get a real great sense of accomplishment when you've achieved whatever the goal of that training session was. We certainly don't want to be training hard or even moderately hard every single day of the week. We need some downtime and we need some recovery. So lots of our training is what we call zone 2. It's that low level aerobic training, which is often described as conversational. You may just about be able to breathe through your nose rather than gasping for breath. And out of a scale of 0 to 10, you're probably looking at a 4 or a 5 if you were to rate the intensity of your effort. A lot of our training through the week is at that level, but the more hours you can spend doing that, then the better for you and your development. If you're a little more experienced, you might do up to 3 or possibly 4 very hard sessions a week, again with the remainder of your time being the low level aerobic exercise. And then after that, really, we can try to then perhaps schedule in some strength training. Strength training is ideal. It's definitely going to help our development. It's going to help injury prevention. And if you have had numerous injuries or specific injuries that keep recurring, then I would consider strengthening that particular area of your body every week as a preventative measure. If you know that you're generally weaker, you know, simply looking at your body shape and body type and perhaps where your background in sport is, then again you might be benefited by adding 1 or 2 strength sessions in per week. But for athletes who have perhaps come from a team sport background, you know, such as football, rugby, hockey or netball, you might find that you're used to those harder, more muscular, more intense efforts, and perhaps strength training isn't one of your major issues, so we could leave it out in that case. Now, looking at your race event, you need to consider whether you've signed up for one of the earlier events or the later events across this triathlon season. Now, the farther away you are from your goal race, the focus should really be just to become fitter, to build that aerobic energy. And most of that is through swimming and biking and running, but you can also use some other cross-training activities, because as long as your heart and your lungs, your blood vessels, your muscles are working aerobically, it often doesn't matter so much in what way you're actually doing that. Now, as that aerobic engine is building, you might also be thinking about some specific sort of skill work. And again, as I mentioned before, the area that really demands a high level of aptitude for technique is the swim stroke. And particularly if you're a novice swimmer and haven't grown up in swimming clubs and the like of that, then you perhaps need to get some instruction and watch some videos even, and try to maybe join up with some swim clubs to help you develop those skills, rather than simply thinking of it as a fitness exercise. Now, the closer you then get to your race, at some point you need to think about training specifically for the demands of your race and the race distance and the time that you're likely to be out on the race course. So the things that you might consider to add in at this point would be open water swimming, you know, getting the wetsuit on, acclimatizing to the darkness of the water in most cases, sighting the buoys or looking for landmarks to aim towards as you're swimming. It's a totally different experience than swimming in a swimming pool. Obviously the temperature is a lot colder as well. You may wish to add in some brick sessions, which is the term for running straight after a bike ride. And again, that will mimic the race day, so that's worth adding in closer to the race itself. You might want to practice your transitions, you know, getting out of the wetsuit and getting onto your bicycle as quickly as possible, and equally coming off your bicycle and getting into your running stride as quickly as possible. So some transition practice might be worth a go just a couple of times before your race day. You might then also think about trying to dial in a race pace or a race effort, and think about your strategy. You know, how hard will you swim? What will it feel like? And then onto the bike, will you use heart rate? Have you got a power meter? Or will you simply go off feel? You know, what will your race effort feel like? And similarly on the run, what will that run feel like after you've biked and swam on that day? And how hard can you afford to run early on in order to still get to the finish line, but hopefully get to the finish line just about spent of all your energy? And that would be an ideal situation. So you might want some race specific sessions where you aim to calculate how hard you can go on the race day. And finally, you might want to consider a race nutrition strategy. And this is really important to practice this beforehand. So maybe even start with your race breakfast, what you plan to have on the day, and then consider how much fluid you're going to take, whether you're going to use some sports nutrition supplements or real food in the race, and actually practice with that at least a couple of times before your race day, again to see how your stomach handles it and to give yourself confidence when it comes to the race. So just some basic advice there. Obviously these are some of the things that we consider as coaches, and if you would like to develop a personalized triathlon training program, you can obviously get in touch with me on the Total Tri Training website, and if you'd like to work with me personally, then again you can find my coaching details on the TTT coaching page. Good luck with your race, and we'll catch up with some more information in due course.